Hi, I'm Greg Howlett, and I want to talk to you a little bit about accompanying. Accompanying in the context of accompanying soloist or maybe a duet or instrumentalist, not accompanying a congregation, but accompanying smaller groups. Now, this is only a 1-hour course, but this is a very, very critical skill for church pianists and one that many of us need help in. I go in a lot of churches, and what I hear is that pianists just try to adapt their normal stride, congregational accompaniment style to a situation where they're playing for a smaller group, and it just doesn't work very well. So this course will give you a very, very solid approach to coming up with accompaniments that work within the context of what you're trying to do. We talk about everything, such as intros, endings, but we talk about how do you change the what you're playing so you're not playing a melody. Now that's a very, very important concept. You don't want to play the melody underneath somebody singing. If they're singing the melody, you don't want to be playing the melody. That's a very important concept. Here is a clip from the course that talks about that. If we turn to page 2, I want to give you a few things that are obvious probably to some of you. But to some of you, you may not have never thought of this. And these are important things to consider. First of all, let's look at this first example. And this is a very, very typical thing. I hear this a lot. I hear this an awful lot, pretty much everywhere I go. I'll walk into a church and I'll hear a soloist, and the accompanist will play something like this. Now, this is a song. We're using the song Jesus Paid It All through this whole course. You have the melody line right here. The soprano. You have a soprano singing. Okay, so that's your melody line. Above it, you have the chords, E flat, B flat, and E flat. Okay. Now, long term, as a church musician, this is what you're going to end up with. You're going to end up with the melody line and the chords. That's called a lead sheet. In some cases, you may have more notes than that to choose from. You may have maybe a page copied from a hymnal. But in the long run, this is all you need. You need a melody line and you need chords. And so you might see something like this, and you'll hear somebody playing this. Let's see. Okay, so somebody's singing, I heard the Savior say, thy strength indeed is small, and the accompaniment is basically mimicking what they're playing. Notice the melody line is still there, completely still there. And this is not a great scenario, quite honestly. Now, a lot of cases, at least they're not doing this. Just playing tons of notes, playing the style that you might accompany a congregation. So you're trying to get better. In a lot of cases, accompanists know we got to play a few fewer notes, so they may chord just on the first part of each measure, but there's still way, way too much here. Really, you can improve this dramatically by doing nothing more than ditching all these notes here. That's all you have to do, and you'll get a much, much better sound. This is better. Notice what we got here. We just have one chord per measure. And then we have to change chords at some point because sometimes the underlying chord of the song changes. So right here we have another chord. But that's all. You've just gotten rid of all those notes. Now you have something simple. All right, so if you don't play the melody, what do you play? Well, very simply, you play patterns on the harmony. You have to get the song reduced down to the chords, and then you just play the chords in patterns. You improvise on the chords. Now, a big part of this course is teaching you patterns and how to come up with your own patterns to play underneath a small group or a soloist. Here's an example of a clip where I'm going through that process. You're looking for fancy stuff to play. If you're playing, let's say, pretty much anything, you can always come up with runs that use the scale of the key you're in. Okay? In this case, these runs I didn't think too much about, but they're just E-flat runs within the scale. They work within the scale of E-flat. You can tell that easily because they're sort of moving sequentially and there's no accidentals. You can pretty much play, that's called playing within the key. You can pretty much come up with all kinds of technical treatments you want if you use the notes that belong to the key. It's like a pool of notes at your disposal for all these technical things you can do. Just play notes that belong to the key. As it turns out, pretty much any note will work as long as it belongs in the key of E flat. And by the way, you know that because it's in the E flat scale. All right, fills, we move on. I want to talk about fills for a while. We've sort of been covering this to some extent as we've been going, the concept of fills. Fills, again, are places where you're going to fill up dead space. And this is a very, very important concept as an accompanist. You want to fill up dead space. Here's what you don't want to happen. You don't want to find yourself doing this, where the soloist is playing this. And they're going to hold that for 4 beats. The last thing you want is to be doing this. 1, 2, 3. In other words, resting with them. That just doesn't really sound so good. You want to avoid that kind of thing. So we're going to talk now about how do you fill in those kind of holes. There's a lot of different ways to do it. We'll walk through. As a matter of fact, right on this page, I'm going to show you just a lot of little thoughts and things you can do. And then there's just, oh goodness, you could go forever on this topic. Arpeggios, play the chords, play inversions, play intervals, all kinds of patterns. You could do rhythmic things and on and on. So we'll look at a few of those over the next few minutes. Again, you do this when the musician is resting, the person you're accompanying is resting. You want to be filling up space. Okay? Now, here's the first one. This is the most basic. The most basic thing you can do to fill space is to just repeat the chord up in different registers. And that's what's happening here. We're repeating that chord twice, right here and right here. So you get to the point where the musician is holding an F for a half dotted half. You just play on the quarter notes 3 times, different intervals. Okay, that's an F chord. Again, we have the G added to it, which makes it, the G is the second of that chord. So it's an F chord add 2, okay? Let's see if I can throw that in a song. I'm going to change Jesus Paid It All to the key of F. Well, so you would just play that in that space, something like that, and then they start Child of Weakness, Watch and Pray, and you've just filled in that space using just those simple chords. That's the easiest thing you can do, really. And it works. It works. You don't even have to fill both notes. Just fill one of them. You could make this a half note and throw that one away if you wanted to, or vice versa. You can make this a half note and play there. You just need to do something to fill up some of the space. You can make it more complicated too. You could play, well, we'll show you some stuff in a minute. The next example is another little thing that you can do, and this is probably more popular, a little bit more flexible even than the first thing, and that is you play, essentially you're playing inversions of the last chord that you played. Okay, so we ended on this chord here, which is an F chord. Now we're going to play inversions. One of the things that's important as an accompanist is an introduction. And that's something that we cover in detail in the course as well. How do you come up with an introduction that doesn't sound cliche, where you're just not playing the last line of the song, like we tend to fall into the bad habit of doing? How do you come up with fresh sounding introductions? Here's a clip that talks a little bit about that. So again, it sounds like this. Sorry, I changed. Now, that's all you have to do. Some of you are thinking, really? You would do that? Absolutely, I would do it all the time. And I'll tell you why. One reason that it's really good to do that is because, first of all, if the person misses the place where they're supposed to come in, no sweat, right? You just keep playing. It's funny, it depends on the soloist or whoever you're accompanying, but they miss their points to come in, don't they? I don't know if it's nervousness or they're just not sure. There's not a comfort level there. And so people will miss where they're supposed to come in. You always have to be prepared for that anyway. If you're improvising a intro, expect that sometimes they're going to miss their spot, and your job is to cover that up. It's not to find a way to cover it up but let everybody know how great you are that you covered it up. It's to really cover it up where they don't know, the audience doesn't even know that the person didn't come in. There's no better way than to do that than give them a very, very simple intro. Even if you played something like this. Go to something like that. Something like that, just so they have every bit of confidence that they're either going to come in at the right place, or if they miss their spot, you just play the 2 bars again and they can come in again when they're ready. Sometimes you may have to play that for a while before they come in. I've seen that too. But that's an easy way to bring a soloist in with just a simple pattern. Now again, any pattern will work. We've talked about a lot of patterns. Something like this. If that's what you're doing to start the song, fire away. Use that in your intro. It sounds really good. It's good to move away from the melody when you're playing these kind of things for a lot of reasons. In a nutshell, you could break down accompanying in just a few things: intros, patterns, endings, some fills, some basic things, and they're all covered in this course. When you walk away, you'll have a concrete plan for accompanying soloists and small groups in your church.